for the development. We talked about how we came up with the topics and how it filtered up from the evidence and the data and the literature. We talked about how it filtered up from the community. But what was the actual process to get us to those 15 to 18 elements? How did we do that? Was it collective? Was it just internal staff? How did we get to that we have those things? So the pilot sites came together to talk about, to go through and contribute based upon their expertise. We had content experts who are also familiar with each bundle topic. So for example, the postpartum bundle, while it was a bundle that was a combination of two bundles, postpartum care and then transition to well women care, we brought it together because we saw that there was a lot of duplication and a lot of the elements in the bundle, in the components of the bundle. So we got a team together, a committee, which is the bundle committee, and it's filled with subject matter experts. It's filled with organizations that sit on the overarching body of the National Maternal Safety Committee, or the NMSC, internal staff, to move the process along. And then it's a matter of looking at each of the elements, coming together, bridging it with the science, and then seeing what is the most impactful thing we can do to make sure that when a woman delivers a baby, that from the time she delivers her baby until the next time she's interfacing for maternal health care, that she's taken care of, wrapped around and embraced in the community setting through community organizations, and wanting to make sure that it's done in a respectful practice, it's done equitably, and make sure that the staff is trained as well on how to do these approaches. So that's really the process in how we did it. It's democratic, it's collective, it's collaborative, and it's not just us sitting here from our view and our lens from the ivory tower saying, this is what needs to happen, this is what we see. It's a collective of experts in this field.
The selection process for the initial pilot sites we had was based on data, based on what we were seeing, at least what we were getting from national data set that was telling us the locations or areas with severe high level of maternal mortality, but also severe maternal morbidity. So within that scope, we reached out to different communities based on these data points or dynamics that we learned from publicly available sources. And we reached out to different community members, and we were able to have conversations about their capacity or even interest to be able to participate in such program. And part of the criteria for them to be able to participate in AIM CCI was their ability to convene diverse set of community-based organizations to push this work forward. And as part of that conversation and discussion, we and them had the understanding that the ability for such a program to work effectively, we needed to bring in as many community members as possible to be able to meet each and every one of the touch points that a woman or birthing person goes through in the prenatal, perinatal, and even in the postpartum period. So those are part of the, I think, initial criteria for us engaging communities. Now, as we continue to implement this program, we are going to evolve to be able to utilize a diverse set of check marks, if you will, on how we bring in other implementation sites to ensure that we are meeting a broad scope of diversity in the needs of communities, but also within the same overarching goal of improving maternal health outcomes, both with the scope of maternal mortality and severe maternal morbidity.
And I think one of the important things you talked about is bringing everyone to the table to make sure that the woman has multiple touch points. And they do that in the context of the local maternal safety work group, or the LMSW. So we have the NMSC, National Maternal Safety Committee, as the overarching body, which is really represented locally in the community through the local maternal safety work group, in that making sure that we have advocacy organizations, maternal child health membership organizations, clinicians, practitioners. We have everyone who would have contact with the woman throughout this continuum perspective to make sure that their perspectives and knowledge and know-how are also included in the work that they're doing on the ground, and it's able to be replicated on the ground real time. Now, when we talk about that, we also need to talk about a little bit, if you haven't done this work before, you're new to this work as a person who's dealing with women or working with women, how do you go about that in an equitable way, in an equitable practice? So we have tools and trainings for staff on how to basically evaluate where they are in the equity continuum. Would you like to talk a little bit about RELS, Liddy Bez, and what we've created as a resource for the program?
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up, Deidre. So we have created the Racial Equity Learning Series, RELS, as you indicated. And RELS is built in with an evaluation. You have a pre-test and a post-test, which is a SAMRAC, the self-assessed measurement for racial equity capacity. And in that space, what we have done is created, again, this training. The objective is to bring these trainings not only to our partners and our pilot sites, but everyone to really start thinking about racial equity, not only in the maternal child health space, but across the spectrum in terms of racism, and be able to think about it intrinsically, thinking about yourself, your contribution to racism, but also on an organizational level. So the great thing about RELS is that it's a 7-step module series. And within the series, what you're doing is you are building up your own understanding, but it also tackles leadership. So leadership is also responsible, looking at organizations, institutions, and really having difficult but necessary conversations about racism. And one of the most compelling things about the Racial Equity Learning Series is that it speaks about real stories. We all heard about toolkits, we've all heard about trainings, especially during this time, but it really digs in and speaks about personal stories, very difficult stories about women, mothers, birthing persons who have experienced racism and as a result have experienced mortality and morbidity because of inequitable treatments in these spaces.
And I think it's important to say that because this program is funded through a cooperative agreement from HRSA, these resources and tools are free, correct? So
Absolutely.
This is a series that anyone can partake of by visiting our website and go through the 7 set of I can't remember what's here. Modules, equity
Yes.
modules. And they're free to the public for anyone who wants to take it.
An additional caveat, and I really appreciate you mentioning that, Deidre, is that it's also accredited by the American Public Health Association. So there have been boundaries, or I say hindrances in the past, where individuals don't want to really engage in different types of trainings that they're not going to get much out of, but you do get CEs and you get a beautiful certificate in the end. And most importantly, now you're really engulfing yourself in this work.
So, Ladiva, as you mentioned inculcating equity, right, and RELS, and how important that is to AIM CCI. And it's so important, in fact, right, Deidre, that we have identified some foundational elements that you'll find in every single bundle that AIM CCI has created, that are encouraging all of the participants to address equity by taking the Racial Equity Learning Series and also being data-driven. So data and equity are 2 points that will follow every single bundle. They're not specific to one certain topic.
Yes, and I'd like to add on to the data question. We are very careful in taking an approach that is not burdensome to our pilot sites or even the participant at the local maternal safety work group. We are also cognizant of the fact that other organizations may have difficulties with access to data. So we take a 5-3-3 approach, meaning 5 outcome measures, 3 process, and 3 structural measures. Now, that does not mean we are limiting ourselves to accessing data. We are always open to organizations exploring beyond that boundaries that we've established. And we always encourage moving beyond that space. And that allows us to be able to better understand the data dynamics within a community, but it also allows us to be able to know exactly what is actionable and how can we take the limited data that we have to inform the processes that we take in terms of implementation for the bundle elements.
Sonia, you said something, a word that was very key, actionable. And so I'm keying this up because I want you to answer because you have a lot of experience in this. What would be the purpose of someone picking up the bundle, especially when you talk about, we know now that it's not data burdensome, it's not burdensome in terms of data collection. But how do I know as a community, based upon the elements, that it's actionable steps? Like what have we done or put in the bundle to sort of alleviate or relieve some of the stress if someone might think this is such a heavy lift? Could you give an example of what some of those elements are and how actionable they are from your clinical perspective?
Well, I think the first thing to remember that is actionable in the bundles, and again, this is something unique to the community-based bundles, Not one organization or one system or one person can do every single element in the bundle. So if you are picking up a bundle and saying, oh my goodness, there is a lot to do here, that's why you bring your friends to the table. Because together, the members of the local maternal safety work group each have a stake in that. So that helps to alleviate the burden and really helps to create that system of care that stitches all of this together.
That's really good. And one of the things I think we should mention is that you're not in this alone. We have resources, there's technical assistance, and every bundle has the actual bundle elements. We have the data collection pieces, but we also provide resources like toolkits. We also provide this discussion here for everyone who's going to be watching to sort of give you a background as to what a bundle is, the process for it. But also we really try to do an approach that's more personable in that as we have each of the pilot sites, we want you to really look at in your community, what's the difference, what's the uniqueness of your community. And we try to bring all those things together to the table and that it's not prescriptive, so that everyone can bring the uniqueness of their community to the work that they're doing, because they all know their communities better than we do. So we like to make sure that the bundles are written in a way that it does have best practice, like making sure a woman, ensuring that she's going to her comprehensive postpartum visit. But we don't know what the dynamics are in the community that you're specifically doing the work in. So we leave it broad enough that you have guidelines to really make it and customize it to your specific populations and what you're doing currently to make sure that everyone does have a part in those actionable steps.
Right, and that's a great point. The exemplar of the comprehensive postpartum visit, for example. Many times, a birthing person is told, oh, you need to make an appointment for your postpartum visit in a certain amount of time. However, going home with a new baby, everything that happens at that time, the last thing you're thinking about is making a phone call for an appointment. So communities might look at that element and realize that they have fairly low rates of people coming to their comprehensive postpartum visit. So the local maternal safety work group might get together and come up with a plan for their community. Maybe it makes sense that on hospital discharge, that appointment is made for the birthing person. Maybe that's too burdensome for the hospital, but that is something that the home visitor is going to check in on and facilitate to make sure that appointment gets made. Maybe at the WIC appointment, she's reminded. So communities begin to think about what are the touch points where people are accessing services and how do we create a seamless system by all of us being on the same page.